Alright, we've got our Amazon $80 engine lift here hooked up to the front mount here, the lift point, and then the rear lift point right there. That's just taking the load off of the bottom. And once we crack loose the engine mount nuts, which are in these holes, 17mm on each side. So take these 17mm nuts out, and then essentially the engine is loose right there, and then right here's another one. So once you undo these, you can lift the engine a few inches and start on your procedure. One thing I did want to mention, you probably want to loosen the airbox, the top cover. You do want to disconnect this heater valve here, coolant valve, from the frame, or the firewall. And then you want to watch your power steering reservoir. There's a tab in here that releases it, and make sure this reservoir slides up in case it needs to move up with the engine. Otherwise it'll probably break it or tear the hoses. So those are the three things you got to worry about up here. Now I took off all the shields because, one, you want to kind of see before you do anything crazy. I knew this was leaking, the lower pan. It's a common leak point, but in order to do it you have to raise the engine because there's not enough clearance here to get these bolts out and to put it back on and get a good seal. So you got to raise this a couple inches to get this anyways, so that's why we're doing it at the same time. Something else I've noticed is that I have to put a can, roughly a can of 134A in every year. And I did put dye in, and there's a little bit of greenish in there. That could be corrosion too, sometimes shows up on the UV light. But this looks kind of oily on the bottom here, so I just want to keep that in mind for the future in case I get sick of putting in a can every year, or in case the leak gets worse. I might want to think about a compressor replacement. Obviously Denso or original only. A lot of times the remanufacturers, they will remanufacture an OEM compressor. It's not like they make their own compressors or anything. So just keep an eye out. You don't have to buy from the dealer or anything, but just make sure you're getting a quality one. I noticed also, I don't know why it looks like the serpentine belt is like stitched together. It's kind of weird. I never noticed that. It is a new belt, or a newer belt, but maybe that's just how they make it. I don't know. Oh, actually it's everywhere. It kind of looks like it's stitched. That one I did with the timing belt about 15,000 miles ago or so. So really, yeah, like I was saying, you don't want to like jump to conclusions and say, oh, it's this or it's that. You kind of want to see where is the oil starting. So it's obviously not coming from the upper pan. That's not a common leak point. This is all dry. There's no leakage at all here. There's no leakage above it. The front seal I did, there's no leakage coming down off of the behind the crank pulley. Valve covers is another one. I did valve cover gaskets on here. There's no oil coming down the block anywhere. So really, and then also you might see this and say, uh-oh, I must have like a rear main seal leak. Well, hold on, not yet. Just start with, you don't want to pull obviously the trans and all that before you diagnose it further. So we're going to start with the easiest, which is the lower pan. Change that, spray everything down, and then we'll see if we have any future leaks. But like I said, you want to kind of do things in groups as you can. You see here the cats, I replaced those a while back because the originals were clogged. So that was a fiasco because the first one I got, the flange was kind of off and leaking, so I had to take it off, send it back, get another one. But they're aftermarket cats, they're pretty cheap, but you know, I mean, it is what it is, and they don't leak. But just depends on their jig and how they welded it, and making sure that they actually do them consistently, otherwise you'll get leaks. That's the biggest issue with those. Transpan, yes, it looks like it's leaking a little bit, but I'm not going to do too many things at once. I'll leave this for another day and then tackle that. But like I said, this one's not even dripping on the floor or anything, so. What else? Another issue on the LS's is this front Y pipe here. A lot of times it'll rust under the heat shield and you'll get big time leaks. This whole exhaust I replaced with a rust-free assembly I got used, so I don't have to worry about any of that anymore. If you do replace any of this or parts, the center section behind the cat is a little bit difficult to seal. I think the gasket's like $100 from Lexus. It's like a looks like a donut gasket, but it's big and it fits in there and everything kind of squeezes together. So keep an eye on that. What else? Oh, 2 sensors. These I think they've got to be original, or maybe they were replaced before I got the car, but if you are in here, you might as well go ahead and loosen those and then tighten them up again hand tight, because I mean, usually what happens is you finish all this and then like you'll have an O2 sensor code or something stupid. So you want them at least a little bit tighter than hand tight so you can easily get them out, because they're not easy to loosen if they've been in there a while. So next steps from here, I'm going to take out these nuts and then raise the engine up a little bit, and then we're going to tackle probably the passenger mount first, because it's a lot easier. Basically there's a portal right here, and then you've got a couple bolts, and once we get the passenger out, then we're going to need more clearance on the driver's side, so we might be able to dip this side down a little bit to get more clearance on the opposite side, because the driver's side is hampered by power steering shaft right here, the steering shaft, which kind of goes in front of it, so we're going to need some kind of extensions and angles and all sorts of stuff to get behind here. So that's why it might be beneficial to raise the driver's side up even more and then drop the passenger side down a little bit to work around this versus touching the steering rack. So I'll get started on that. The mounts aren't even here yet. They are on UPS truck for delivery, so I want to get this all done and out before they get here. A little update here. We're getting some separation between the motor mount and subframe, so that's good. And then our oil pan is looking much better. As you can see, we've got almost 2-finger gap in there now, so we're getting there. And the hardest part of the job is twisting these. That's literally the most time consuming, because they're pretty, it's not easy. I mean, you gotta really twist them. I got a pry bar or leverage here to turn them, but it's time consuming for sure. And then here's our power steering reservoir loose, and then our airbox cap here loose, and then this hose here, you can kind of just make sure it doesn't get pulled. Obviously you don't have to remove it. And then here's our valve on the back that's loose. So I'm going to keep at it, and yeah, hopefully get this done in the next hour or two. Passenger side mount is loose. You see right there, all the bolts are out. And then there's one ground wire, don't forget that. That goes in that little smaller hole right there. Now, we still have to jack up the engine more, because first we got to lift this out of the hole on the bottom of the subframe, and it's not high enough to get it out of here. And then we got to work it out of this little gap. This lower mount bolts has a nut attached to this aluminum part inside, so it's not like you can remove the mount separately. You got to remove the whole assembly. On the older LS's, the nut was visible, so you could separate it, but we can't separate this piece. If your mount is broken, obviously you can take it out in 2 pieces, or if you're so inclined, you can cut this mount with the Sawzall and then separate it, but it's still not going to help you when you get the new mount in. You still need to get enough clearance to get the whole thing in. So for the passenger side, all I needed for this was a 12mm socket for the ground bolt, 14mm socket for the mount, and then make sure this is a wobble extension on the top. You'll just need a little bit of flexibility, and then I'd say probably about 18 inches or so. You can go more, just to access the bolts. And then your favorite impact driver. Milwaukee cordless is nice, or if you have an air tool, that's fine too, but it's not easy. I mean, I guess you could use a pry bar, but it's a lot easier just to hit a button and then knock these loose, because they're torqued pretty tight to get them off by hand. So I'll continue lifting the engine and get this thing out of here. Alright, I finally got the last bolt. I'm going to show you how I got it. So you got to take the oil filter off, which is fine because we're doing the pan anyways. I've got a 1/2 inch and a 14mm long extension, 6-point. And then I also lowered the subframe just a hair. I didn't drop it, I just loosened it so I can get the socket and everything in here. I originally tried to do like a super long extension this way with a little wobble or a swivel on the end, and then it kind of came out somewhere like way over here, but it started to slip, so that was kind of the end of that. And then I was thinking, well, if I could loosen the steering rack and pull this out a little bit, maybe I'll have more room. It did give me more room, however, it still didn't solve the problem of just the way the sockets sit on the bolt, and then the angle and the swivels. It was just starting to slip again, so easiest way for me at this point was just to lower the subframe down about, I don't know, 1/2 inch. That gave me the room. That also doubled as giving me the room for the engine mounts, getting those out, or at least the passenger side. And then also to have access and proper torque to get into here and loosen that one up. I know some people said they had to pry the motor mounts up and out. This one's still intact, which is usually correct because the engine torques towards the passenger side. So this one doesn't really get any pulling. But like I mentioned, lowering that subframe just gave me a little bit extra space to get the mount out completely. It just came right out easily. I didn't have to pry on it or anything or jack it up from the bottom. It just fell out. Okay, let's wait for the motorcycle, excessively loud motorcycle, to go by. So that's about it. Just to be safe, I heated up the bolt a little bit with the torch, MAP gas, and then it cracked right loose easily, so no issues there. I'll do another video of getting this mount out of here, how it actually falls out. But let me get this bolt out first, and then I'll be right back. And as you can see here, we've got the mount loose. I don't know how much harder it's going to be getting the new one in with all one piece, but this kind of just dances out of here this way. And then since you raised or dropped the subframe a little bit, you've got plenty of room in here to get this right out. And obviously you can see the mount is just totally gone, which is very common as the engine torques off of the driver's side. So here's our view. And that's it. So I did loosen this. I didn't know if I'd have to take the steering shaft out or the whatever, the power steering rack, but just gotta tighten that down. And then I'm gonna start on the pan, and then once the mounts get here, I will swap them over. So got the pan off and cleaned. It was really clean. There was absolutely no debris in here whatsoever. There's like a piece or two of sealant, but zero chunks, zero muck, zero sludge, nothing. So got this side all cleaned up as well. It was nice having a nice clean piece back on the car. So what we're going to do now is, you can see why this fails. The sealant just gets so old over time. It tends to break down. Like you see, this is brown right here. Should be gray, and then the outside's gray. Right here you can see just where the oil dyed it. Kind of stained it on the outside. But it gets so old and hard, and it just kind of deteriorates to the point where some oil can just start seeping through. So you can take, this does not have a valley in the middle, so you can take either a razor blade to clean this up, or a wire wheel along the surface. And then as far as the aluminum surface on the car, you don't want to scratch that up, so same thing, like a razor blade or a gasket scraping tool or something. But typically it's not going to be difficult to get the remaining sealant off of the pan with a new razor blade like this. It just takes some time and patience. Scrape it off. And then once you've got enough of this off, then you can spray it with brake cleaner or whatever, and then paper towel to get the rest of the residue off. And then once you're sure you have a very nice clean surface that's dry, free of any oil, free of any brake cleaner, that's when we go on to the sealant phase. But I will cover that separately next. For now I'm going to get this all cleaned up and then get ready to put the pan back on and do the proper torque sequence. So this part is kind of the therapeutic part. This is where you really take your time. Spray your brake cleaner on your paper towel and make sure the surface is just perfect, like a mirror almost. Get all this old sealant off. Obviously after you use the razor blade, spend time on these studs here. Make sure there's no extra sealant stuck on them or any rust. And just go around the whole perimeter until you can basically feel what it feels like glass on your finger. There's nothing on your fingernail. And once it's like glass, then we're good. You probably have to let this drain down for a while because it's going to drip and then kind of end up here on your mating surface, and that's not good. So we really want to wait as long as possible, probably a few hours, until it all drips out of here so we can put the pan on successfully. As far as the razor blading goes, I found that you can easily do this front 3/4 section, and then the part that's under or above the subframe here, you can use one hand on one side and then one hand on the other, and then hold the razor blade with both hands and slide it across the surface. And then same with the paper towel, just kind of get it full of your brake cleaner and then stick it up here, and then use both hands to work it back and forth to get all that stuff off of there. So I'm just going to keep cleaning this for probably the next 15 minutes or so, or however long it takes. And then I'll wait until all this oil decides to leak out. When I'm confident there's not going to be any oil contaminating my surface. Then we'll go on to the laying the bead, and then what sealant to use in here, and then how that all goes on properly. You know, spending time under here, you learn a lot about your car. You can learn a lot about fixing cars, how things work. Obviously, this is the oil level sensor. So once the level gets below this, there's going to be a light on your dash. If this doesn't work, then the sensor itself is probably bad. Here's your dipstick. You can kind of see the lower mark here, and so you can visualize, you know, what your oil level looks like when you're checking the dipstick. So the oil is actually above the lower pan. So that's why it's vital for this lower pan to have a good seal, because the oil level is always over it. So the pickup here, this just strains any larger chunks so it doesn't get sucked into the oil system. Yeah, and that's really it. So just basically more of the story is take your time, don't rush, don't lose your tools, don't lose your razor blade. Oh, there it is. So I'll show you just kind of how I got to the back side. So under here you just grab one end and then grab the other, and then you can just kind of push it along because the subframe's in the way. You can't really even see on camera right now, but you get the idea. You basically just go like this and then push it, clean it off. There's enough room. There's at least like 4 fingers width of room between the lower pan or the upper pan and the crossmember. So yep, I'll finish that and then we'll keep on chugging. Okay, so we've got our pan cleaned off here. Surface is nice and clean. I've rubbed it down with brake cleaner to get any final oil residue off. Here's our wonderful Toyota 103. This is the same as 3-bond gray 00295-00103. This is for camshaft housing and oil pan. They have a different one for the transmission. I don't know if it's just for fluid compatibility or color or whatever, but yeah. The other thing you want to know about this stuff is, yes, you can find it online for cheap sometimes, but a lot of times they're selling just old gasket FIPG, and you can tell by there's a date up here, expiration date on top. So you want to make sure this date is still good, because once it's past the date, then it's bad. If you have stuff from like a year ago, 5 years ago, 10, 20 years ago, it's junk. It'll never set right and dry. So yes, and then once you open this, once we pierce this, we've got 6 months of life left. So it's not going to last until whatever this says, October 24. So yeah, this probably was, they had this in stock since about October of 23. So the thing itself has a 1-year lifespan, and then once you pierce it, you've got about 6 months to use it. Otherwise, it'll just never set right and it'll always leak. So those are some tips with this. Next, we're going to put it around the perimeter, just in the center here, and we're going to go to the inside of the pan. If we go to the outside, that's bad. Just always think wherever the fluid is, that's where you want to go around the bolt holes towards the fluid, because we want to block the fluid. And just a nice bead. It doesn't have to be anything crazy. I think probably we can cut 1 or 2 of these off and we'll be good. We can just use this to bead around. Now the other important thing is we've got 3 minutes from the time we put the FIPG on to when it has to be installed and torqued. So I'm going to put this on, and then I'll start the camera again once I'm ready to install the pan, because we have very limited time to get it up there. This tool comes with it. It's supposed to go in here just like this, And you're supposed to be able to like use this to twist it, which is kind of convenient, and then squeeze it out this way. Sometimes I've like ripped the container with this. It's pretty sharp, but yeah, it's a pretty nice tool, so you don't have to squeeze it and get all messed up. You just twist. It's pretty nice. So yeah, that's about all I can say on the Toyota seal packing, aka 3-bond, but I'll get that on and then we'll install the pan. Alright, here we go. We've got the pan ready. We got our nice bead on the inside. And if you're wondering, this stuff is like 15 bucks if you got a wholesale account. Otherwise, I think it lists at 20. Just a little spot right here I didn't like. Retouch that a little bit, add a little bit more. Alright, more is not always better. You just want a nice, careful bead. Nothing insane. It'll always squeeze out, obviously, if it's too much, but we can rest this down and then lift it up. And we're looking for our 2 studs. Toyota conveniently put studs on here, and we need this to go just like that. Our 2 nuts are going to hold this thing on while we do our bolts. There's one. Don't forget to hold the oil pan when you're doing this, because you don't want it to fall and break the seal again. So give it some pressure while you're starting these first couple nuts or studs or whatever, so it doesn't drop down. Okay, so that's good. That's going to hold that right there. Now we need to get booking, because we need all these on and torqued in like 3 minutes, it says. So I'm just doing it right now basically finger tight, because the bolts don't create the seal. It's real important. The FIPG makes the seal. You know, if you tighten it tight, it's actually going to make it worse, because it's going to squeeze it all out. It's going to leak. A lot of people think tighter is better on the oil pan. That couldn't be farther from the truth. Your beautiful gasket maker stuff is going to do all the magic. And the torque on this is only 5 foot-pounds, so it's basically like just finger tight, a little bit more than finger tight. I've got a torque wrench just so we can be sure, because my hands can deceive me sometimes and some can be tighter than the others. But I'm going to get the rest on under the subframe and then I'll be back. Okay, so now that the pan is in, I need to first raise up the subframe again, but ideally I want to lower the engine down, because the mount is so far, it's a good finger gap or 2 finger gap between the mount and the block. So I need to lower the engine down first, then I can get these bolts in, and then I can raise the subframe, because if I raise the subframe now, I'm not going to be able to get to this bolt that was really difficult to get to. And then once I raise the subframe, then I can hook up the steering shaft that I had to disconnect, because obviously we lowered the subframe, so that just separated about 1/2 inch on the shaft. So I am going to lower the engine down a little bit, and then we can get these. As long as I get this first one started, then we're good, because right now this mount is in the subframe, so I just need to align the motor with the mount on both sides. So actually, maybe I could start it now that I'm looking at it. Let me try. This one, I'm going to use the slightly stripped version on a different hole just so it's more accessible in case I want to swap that one out later. I'm not going to put it back on here. This one. Yeah, this will work. So I'm going to tighten this in by hand here. The bottom mount itself is still in the hole on the subframe, so we're good there. Okay, that's good. I'm going to start these other two. There's really nothing to see here on camera, so I'm going to get these just hands started, and then I'll come back when I'm ready to raise the subframe. Alright, we're done. Everything's in. The subframe bolts, the 22 millimeters, are 130 foot-pounds. Also, this big control arm bushing that commonly gets replaced is 130. I think this one's 80 right here, the smaller one. The actual engine mount nut torque is 50 foot-pounds, so don't overdo it on those. And now we're going to get to the, I like to call it the most rewarding part of this, because it's just so easy. It's this Crossmember mount here. Insulator, engine insulator. So apparently over time this gets compressed, so this gets squished down. Visually, like, it looks fine. It's not like it's torn in half or anything on mine, but apparently this is a lot of improvement too. So very simple to get this off. It's actually mounted like this. So these 4 studs are right here. You just take the nuts off, 2, and then you drop the the Crossmember here, look like 14 millimeter, and then it comes down, and then you unbolt the actual insulator from the trans, which another 4 bolts up here. So I'll get those off, and then I'll do one final part, just comparing the old to the new. I'll get this on, and then I'll fill it up with oil, probably overnight. I'll wait just to give it enough time. I know it's only supposed to be like 3 hours or whatever, but I'll give it a good 12 or 14 hours before I fill it up. And that's it. So yeah, we're almost there. Well, all I can do is laugh, really. This mount is totally gone. So basically, I had 2 out of the 3 mounts on this car were totally ripped and not even attached. So I'm pretty excited to see what this is going to feel like with 3 brand new mounts. No more clunking, thumping. Yeah, this is unreal. Another problem is these are steel bolts and this is aluminum trans. So I don't like how these feel already. I hope they don't break. That would be bad. I don't know why they just use aluminum. Makes no sense. So I'm going to try heat. I don't know. I already tried PB Blaster. I really don't want to drill them out, but we'll see. Alright, after a 2-hour detour, I've got all the, because these all broke, obviously, so I got these all drilled and tapped out. New 8 by 1.25 bolts in there. I wish I had an induction heater, a thing with the little ring you put on, and it like gets the bolt red hot. That probably would have eliminated this. But what are you going to do? So these are done. I'm going to get OEM ones, get those ordered, and swap them out when they come. But as you can see, the new mount is super stiff, super perfect, and it literally, like, this is just a joke. Like, it wasn't even attached. It just broke, which is just insane. This probably broke after the engine mount broke, or it was kind of like a domino effect, one after the other. But I'll put kind of in the comments, I'll probably comment on the ride or how the engine feels. I won't do a video on that. But I'm going to put this back in, lower the car down, get the splash shields on, and call this job done. Good night. Thanks for watching. Hopefully I don't have to do anything else on this car in the near future. See ya.